Krishna Krishna Hare Hare.
Good evening, everyone. And
Hare
in just a moment, let me take care of my competition. There we go. All righty, welcome. Thank you all very much for being here. I'm Hari-kirtana, and you're not. But you are here, and that is a great honor for me. And if you can hear the sound of my voice, if a few of you could simply raise your hands. Ah, there we go, the hands rise. Hi. Oh, just seen a bunch of reflection. Now you know why I don't wear my glasses when I speak to you here. Thank you very much, Thea, nice to see you. Elizabeth, Sue, Alistair, Mary, Neil, Amadava. Thea, thank you so much for being here and raising your hands. You can put your hands down now. Thank you for your cooperation. Let's review just a little bit. My hope is that, for those of you who are new and haven't heard me talk about this previously, that this webinar series will help you to develop a deeper relationship with the Bhagavad-gita. And one of the reasons that I'm doing this, frankly, quite selfishly, is to deepen my own relationship with the text. The best way to learn something is to teach it to others. So I, in part, created this webinar series so that I would have the opportunity to deepen my own relationship with the Bhagavad-gita. So whether you've read the Bhagavad-gita many times, or you've been promising yourself you were going to read it, or you have tried to read it and not gotten so far, as the case may be, I hope that this will help you get a little closer to the Bhagavad-gita. We will share the screen because I'm a generous fellow. All right, so you know that you can raise your hand as you have done so. You can adjust your audio settings. You can adjust your video options up in the upper right-hand corner. No worries as far as your own microphone or video camera are concerned. You can see me, but I cannot see or hear you. If you have any questions at any point in time, please type them into the Q&A box. And all right, is there anyone else who cannot hear me? Please type into the Q&A if you are not, either way, let me know I can hear you or you cannot hear me. Please give me some feedback on this. Make sure that everything is technically correct. You have audio settings. All right, so Mary, check your audio. You can't hear me, so why am I telling you this? Everyone else can hear me. So please check your audio settings. All right, very good. Thank you. Hi, Jess. Thank you very much for confirming the state of affairs, and we will proceed with the hopes that audio settings will be adjusted. Okay. What happened last week? You're probably wondering. Well, I'll tell you. What happened last week is we spoke about Karma Yoga, which is the name of this chapter of the Bhagavad-gita, how Arjuna doesn't get it, action versus renunciation, whether they are two different things or can be combined into one thing. Are they mutually exclusive or mutually reinforcing? How to be a yoga poser. We covered verses 3:1 through 3:8. Ah, very good. I'm very happy. Thank you, Mary. This week, here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the art of sacrifice, the art of action without reaction. We're going to defy the laws of material nature. We'll look at what might be dismissed as primitive mythology, a showstopper in the Bhagavad-gita, or at least something that many people feel needs to be subject to some interpretation, or this is where things become metaphor, or what have you. Mixing metaphors, may the force be with you, Mr. Spock. Unlike others in this particular realm of sci-fi, I have absolutely no problem with putting Star Wars and Star Trek together in the same place. And as I hope to demonstrate, the two have something in common, and that common ground is found right here in this set of verses tonight. So that set of verses will be chapter 3, text 9 through 15. So here we go. I'm going to read the translations of these verses, and then we are going to go back and focus on them individually. We're going to pay special attention to the very first verse. So here we go. This is chapter 3, text number 9. Free from attachment, act only for the sake of offering your actions to Vishnu, O son of Kunti, Arjuna. For by such perfect action you will be liberated from all reactions associated with your deeds. Otherwise, your actions will bind you to this material world. Having sent, this is text 10. Having sent forth all beings, humans and demigods, along with sacrifices at the dawn of creation, the Lord of all beings declared, by this sacrifice, may you live long and prosper. Let this sacrifice be your wish-fulfilling cow of plenty. Text 11. The demigods, satisfied by your offering, will satisfy you in return. By thus pleasing one another, you shall attain the highest good. Text 12. Satisfied by sacrifice, the demigods will surely fulfill your desires. However, one who enjoys the gifts of the demigods without reciprocating with them is surely a thief. Text 13. The virtuous, whose food consists of the remnants of sacrifice, are released from the complicity in evil, whereas the wicked, who prepare food exclusively for their personal enjoyment, consume only suffering. Text 14. All beings subsist on food. Food is a product of rain. Rain is a product of sacrifice. And sacrifice is a product of prescribed duties. Text 15. Prescribed duties are prescribed in the sacred literature, the Vedas. The sacred literature originates in the imperishable absolute, Om. Therefore, the all-pervading absolute is eternally situated in acts of sacrifice. So that's our set of verses for this evening. Now, let's look at these verses in detail, and we'll begin, with our first verse, and that's the verse we're going to chant this evening. So let's get back to here. All right. So this is verse 9. A quick review of Sanskrit diacritical marks. This tilde over an N is a nya sound, like the Three Stooges. Nya, nya, nya. The bar over the vowel is a long open sound. An apostrophe before a consonant means that there was a vowel that dropped out right there, and the word will now join with the vowel at the end of the word prior. So this is one of the ways that Sanskrit grammar works to come up with the right number of syllables for the meter, the poetic cadence of these verses. Dot under the H at the end of a word, at the end of a line, means you echo back the vowel behind that appears before it back. And not so when the word appears with the H beneath it in the middle of a line, in which case you just come to a short stop with that vowel. Okay, here we go. I chant, you chant back. Yagyartat karmano nyatra loko yam karma bandhanaha tad artham karma kaunteya mukta sangha samachara. Righty. I forgot to mention C's in Sanskrit are always a CH sound. If you want a K sound, you get a K. If you want an S sound, you get an S. The C, therefore, indicates a CH sound. And if you see a CH, then you put a little extra air after the C, because you pronounce every letter when you pronounce transliterated Sanskrit. The translation, once again: free from attachment, act only for the sake of sacrifice, offering your actions to Vishnu, O son of Kunti, Arjuna, for by such perfect action you will be liberated from all reactions associated with your deeds. Otherwise, your actions will bind you to this material world. This is one of the most important verses in the Bhagavad-gita. There are three kinds of karma. Karma, which implies automatically good karma, or work, action that is in harmony with cosmic order. Vikarma, action that is antithetical to cosmic order, that is disharmonious and therefore produces a disharmonious result for the actor. And akarma, or action that does not produce any reaction at all. And that sounds impossible. Certainly Sir Isaac Newton would think so. It's conventional wisdom, common knowledge. Everybody knows that every action produces an equal and opposite reaction, or in the case of karma, what goes around comes around. You do something and something happens. And to be liberated means to be free from the obligation of experiencing karmic reactions. So the question becomes, how is it possible to act in this world without generating a karmic reaction in order to eventually become liberated? How do you run the table on your karma? How do you empty out your karmic bank account in order to be liberated? Here is the answer. And you notice it's relatively early in the Bhagavad-gita. Krishna gives us the answer to this conundrum right here. By only acting for the sake of sacrifice, or in other words, by offering all your actions to Vishnu, the supreme being, the highest truth, the absolute, then that action is liberating. You are freed from the obligation of experiencing a reaction associated with your action. Otherwise, in other words, everything else that you do that is not an offering of sacrifice will bind you to this material world. Which means that the reaction may be good or the reaction may be bad. But either way, you have to stick around to experience it. So from the standpoint of one who is attempting to achieve or attain liberation or transcendence, bad karma is obviously bad, and good karma is also bad. What I'd like to do is look at the word-for-word translation of this verse in order to go even deeper into it, and by doing so, understand more about the verses that follow it. So here we go. This is the word-for-word translation. This word-for-word translation is taken from A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada's Bhagavad-gita as it is. I've cross-referenced it with a few other editions of the Bhagavad-gita that have a word-for-word translation included, which most editions do not. Just to make sure that there, to offer you some variations on these word-for-word translations, if it helps to make this any more clear, which of course is what we're trying to do here. So, yajna means sacrifice. Yajna artat, done only for the sake of sacrifice, or Vishnu. Why would the word for sacrifice, yajna, the Y is sometimes pronounced with a little bit of a J sound, so yajna, with Y and J combined. Why would sacrifice specifically mean sacrifice for the sake of Vishnu, as opposed to anyone else or anything else? Vishnu, another name for Vishnu is Jagya Purusha. Purusha means person, so the person for whom sacrifice is ultimately intended is the Jagya Purusha, and that is Vishnu. Tat, of him. The word tat indicates a person. So it's not like you sacrifice for a cause or a concept or an ideal or an idea or some other thing that is not a person. Here, we're talking about making offerings to a particular person, and in the later verse, later verses that follow this one, two particular persons. And when we get there, I'll talk about how we make this particular distinction. So, tat, of him, artam, for the sake, similar to the word joined with jagya at the top of the verse, artat, karma, work, or action. So, work for the sake of Vishnu, or make all of your work an offering to the Supreme Being. Anyone who has read the Yoga Sutras will probably think this sounds very familiar. Ishvara pranidhana, offering the life force, everything you do in your life, to the Supreme Being, Ishvara, is the means by which the perfection of samadhi, samadhi siddhir, is achieved. And that perfection is undeviating, spontaneous absorption in the ultimate object of meditation, Ishvara himself, and the sound incarnation of Om, which brings about kaivalya, or freedom, isolation from the influence of the material energy. So here we see a correlation between this idea of sacrifice to Vishnu in the Bhagavad-gita and offering one's life force to Ishvara in the Yoga Sutras. Okay. Otherwise, what happens? Anyatra, otherwise, karma bandhana, bondage by work. So the Sanskrit word bandha means lock or binding. Bandhana and bondage. The English word bondage has its etymological root in this Sanskrit word bandhana. So karma bandhana means work that binds one, that ties one in a tight knot of obligation to experience a reaction. And in order to do that, one must remain under the influence of the material energy. So this sounds like a kind of zero-sum proposition. It's one thing or the other. And the reason it sounds like a one thing or the other proposition is because That's what it is. We'll take some other harsh jokes in just a moment. I want to jump ahead, and I'm not going to do this very often because I really want to reveal the Bhagavad-gita in the same order that Krishna reveals his teachings. But every so often, it will be helpful to jump ahead. And in this case, we're going to jump ahead to chapter 5, text 29. This is the last verse of the 5th chapter. Now, when we started, I spoke about the structure of the Bhagavad-gita and how it is elliptical, that Krishna will present some subject matter and then move on and come back to it, but will go deeper. So this verse, further on in the Gita, references back to the verses that we are reading right now, and this one verse in particular. So we'll chant this verse as well. And once again, you will see the same diacritical marks. The dots on the top or bottom of a consonant indicate a full closure of both the front of your mouth, the lips, and closing your tongue in the back up to the back of the roof of your mouth. So the R in the first word of the third line is actually a vowel. So the R with the dot underneath it is pronounced ri. And that way you can get away with something that looks like 3 consonants in a row. Okay, here we go. Once again, I chant, you chant back. Here we go. Bhoktaram yagyatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhridham sarvabhutanam Gyatva mam shantim richchati. So here in this last word, richchati, is an example of the C followed by the CH that I spoke about earlier. So you double up on the CH sound, but the second CH sound gets a little air after it. Richchati. Alrighty. Here's the translation of this verse. Peace is attained by knowing me to be the beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme Lord of all worlds, and the most benevolent friend within the heart of all beings. So this is a pretty far out declaration. Remember that at the point where we're at in the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna has just kind of hinted at his position. And in the verse that we're focusing on, 3:9, he's talking about himself in the third person. He's referencing Vishnu as if there was some difference between himself, Krishna, and Vishnu. And he'll do that from time to time. He will also do that when he speaks of himself as Param Atma, or the supreme Atma, the supreme being within the heart of all beings. But here, he speaks about himself in that role in the first person. The most benevolent friend within the heart of all beings. That's me, is what Krishna is saying. We'll look at the word for this verse as well. So here we have the word for word, same source and cross-referencing as before. So we begin with Bhoktaram, the beneficiary, yajna of sacrifices. So Krishna here is saying that he himself is actually Vishnu, who is the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices. This will come into play in the later verses, but in an extended way, which will become clear in just a moment. Okay, Maha Ishvaram. So Maha means great. like Maharaja. Raja means king, and Maha means great. So a Maharaja is a great king. And Ishvaram, the supreme person. So Maha Ishvaram in the verse was Maheshwaram. When you combine the A at the end of Maha and the I at the beginning of Ishvara, it transforms into an E sound. And that's how you put the two words together. So let's go all the way back. So here in the end of the second line, Maheshwaram is Maha and Ishvaram put together. Gyatva, thus knowing, like jnana, knowledge. Mam, me, Krishna. Krishna speaking about himself directly, self-referentially. Santim, relief from material distress, or peace. Shanti, shanti, shantihi. Richchati, one achieves. So we'll read this backwards. One achieves relief from material distress, knowing me to be the Supreme Lord and the beneficiary of all sacrifices. So here, Krishna is revealing himself in his position as the Jagya Purusha, the person for whom all sacrifices are ultimately intended, and all sacrifices are to be offered for those who seek to be liberated from the reactions to their actions. So, any questions about this verse and how these two verses are related, 3:9 and the last verse from chapter 5? Go ahead and, or if you have any comments about these two verses as well, please go ahead and ask. Okay, so if you're doing it willingly, why is it called a sacrifice? Good question. One can make a willing sacrifice. It is not that the word sacrifice means giving up something or offering something unwillingly. For example, a parent makes sacrifices for a child. What is their motivation? They're motivated by love. Sometimes they may be less willing than others. Sometimes it may be more of an austerity to make this sacrifice than others. But still, it's a willing sacrifice, and the motivation for that sacrifice is love. So the word, I'm tempted now to break out the dictionary, but the word does not necessarily imply a grudging or unwilling sacrifice, simply that one offers something. And as we're about to see as we move through these next few verses, the motivation can change. Because, sometimes one makes a sacrifice because it's their duty to do it. And perhaps one of you who's more qualified in this regard can offer a comment about this. When one is engaged in military service, then one is expected, as a matter of duty, to be willing to make a sacrifice, and in some instances, perhaps the ultimate sacrifice. Not because there's some pleasure in it or reward other than knowing that one has done the right thing, one has done their duty. So there's that aspect of sacrifice as well, that sometimes you make a sacrifice because it needs to be made and it's your duty to do it, not because you're going to enjoy the results of that sacrifice. But still, it's willing, it's still voluntary. So I hope that clears this up, that you are giving something up, but it's not necessarily an unwilling sacrifice. Okay, any other questions about this? Okay, so I am going to go back now and read the other verses and offer some, what I hope will be some additional insights into the balance of the verses that we are looking at this evening. So chapter 3, verse 10. Having sent forth all beings, humans and demigods, along with sacrifices at the dawn of creation, the Lord of all beings declared, by this sacrifice may you live long and prosper. Let this sacrifice be your wish-fulfilling cow of plenty. Now, this verse has some subtle differences from the verse that precedes it. Here, the Lord of all beings is not the supreme person. The Lord of all beings is the first progenitor. There is this idea in the Vedic literature, of which the Bhagavad-gita is a part, that the creation and population of the universe with all beings, human beings, higher beings than human beings, lower beings than human beings are considered kind of a middle range birth, which is actually a great opportunity. Proceeds in a very orderly fashion. And there are first beings who, at the dawn of the creation of the universe, are charged with the duty of populating the place, of bringing all other beings into being. And at this point, we start to think, well, that does not jive at all with any other model of how the universe comes into being and how beings come into being. We have the Western religious model, which is, I guess, a little more similar. And we have the Western scientific model, where beings evolve. Now, the Vedic version directly contradicts the non-theistic, popular scientific conception of a universe that pops into being for no cause, for no reason, absolute chance, and conscious beings coming into being as a result of a chance combination of material elements evolving over time without any force being acted upon them. It's just nature doing her thing like an automaton. And these are mutually exclusive worldviews. And as I've spoken about previously, I personally have never heard a reconciliation of these two worldviews that makes any sense. So now you have to ask yourself, well, does this make sense? Does the idea that there are higher order beings in dimensions of the universe we don't have access to, does that do a better job of explaining the world? And if those beings exist, do we have some relationship with them where we're supposed to perform some ceremony to some god we cannot see in order to get nature to act favorably for us? Well, here are a few thoughts that you can consider. A few years ago, I walked into our bathroom and found a centipede in the sink. I have no idea how it got there, but I knew that it wasn't good for the centipede to be there. And so I found a card of some kind and managed to coax the centipede on the card and hold on. And I assume that the centipede lived happily ever after. I just got a message that my internet connection is a little unstable, so I apologize. I am connected to my router and everything looks like it's good, but if the video is freezing up at all, I apologize due to technical circumstances beyond my control. So, presumably the centipede lives happily ever after, but the centipede had no idea that I was there. As far as I can tell, it's completely oblivious to my presence and certainly could not conceive of my existence. The idea that I lived in an apartment building, that I took an elevator down to take it outside and then took it back up to get on with my life. The extent of my life, the amount of time that I would live relative to the centipede. The centipede could not possibly conceive of me and my life. We like to think that, we're the hotshots of the universe. This is our hubris. This is our ego talking. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there or that they are not there. I personally find the idea of higher order beings who are in charge of various aspects of universal affairs, and as we'll see in a minute, how our senses work in relationship to nature, is actually much more plausible than the idea that everything just happens by chance. So here's another thing. Let us consider the condition of the environment. Scientists who actually study climate change are sounding alarm bells and freaking out. And most of us are not actually paying attention. They're flipping out because what they see is a climate being drastically and very adversely affected by human beings. So adverse and so drastic that unless drastic action is taken to change course, we're in for a very, very rough time insofar as the climate goes. And we've already experienced this. We have hurricanes. There was just an article in the New York Times the other day about how hurricanes are showing up. They're bigger, they're more severe, and they stay put. They just hang out in the same place for longer, a lot longer than they used to. Well, we're hearing here that when we try to exploit the resources of material nature for our own selfish purposes, without acknowledging that these are gifts given to us, that bad things start to happen. When I put all this together, it just sort of makes sense to me that acknowledging that there is a cosmic order, and it is our duty to bring ourselves into harmony with cosmic order in order for the cosmos, for nature to cooperate with us. Well, that makes a lot more sense than things being done the way they currently are. So here are just some ways to think about this that you can entertain to decide for yourself what makes sense to you. You can see in this particular verse, may you live long and prosper. This is, of course, the Vulcan blessing. And what it indicates is that here we're not dealing with karma yoga anymore. Krishna has pivoted in this verse and in the next few verses, not to karma yoga, but to karma. In other words, sacrifice to the demigods is recommended in order to bring about good karma, as opposed to karma yoga, which is sacrifice for the sake of Vishnu. Two different things. But at least if we're engaged in good karma, recognizing that it is our duty to act in harmony with cosmic order. That at least puts us on the right track towards karma yoga. So I'll go on with the next couple of verses that go a little deeper into this idea. This now is text 11. The demigods, satisfied by your offering, will satisfy you in return. By thus pleasing one another, you shall attain the highest good. Good karma comes from acting in harmony with cosmic order, which includes recognizing those beings that are keeping cosmic order in order. 12. Satisfied by sacrifice, the demigods will surely fulfill your desires. However, one who enjoys the gifts of the demigods without reciprocating with them is surely a thief. Basically, the idea here is that everything is supplied to us. The sun, the rain, the soil, the earth, the seeds, everything we need to live on planet Earth is supplied to us. Where does it come from? We don't make it. We don't create it. In modern industrial technological farming, there is the attempt to create it, to be independent from nature and nature's order. And the results are always terrible. Frankenfood is bad for you. Everyone knows this. Organic food used to just be called food. Speaking of food, the virtuous, whose food consists of the remnants of sacrifice, are released from complicity in evil, whereas the wicked, who prepare food exclusively for their personal enjoyment, consume only suffering. So this is our next really harsh toke. The idea that if you're just trying to enjoy the world, and in particular in this example, if you are taking the gifts of nature, turning those gifts into food for yourself, and not recognizing the source of the gifts, then as a thief, the laws of nature come back around and punish us. So this is a very unfortunate situation. We have a question, so I will digress for just a moment. How do you know what you can sacrifice? Will Vishnu accept anything? Well, that's going to come later. Here, just the idea of sacrifice is being discussed. And if we don't accept just the principle that sacrifice must be made, that some offering in exchange for the gifts that we are receiving, something must be offered back. If we don't accept that, then it doesn't matter what Vishnu will or will not accept as a sacrifice, or what is an appropriate sacrifice to give to the demigods. So here, Krishna is simply speaking about the idea of sacrifice. Later, once again, in the elliptical progression of the Bhagavad-gita, Krishna will revisit this idea of an offering and speak about what constitutes a suitable offering. Cliffhanger. You're going to have to hang around to find out what that is. So moving ahead to verse 14, all beings subsist on food. Food is a product of rain. Rain is a product of sacrifice. And sacrifice is a product of prescribed duties or rituals. So this sounds like primitive mythology. You know, we're going to do a rain dance. We're going to perform a ceremony that will appease the gods in order to bring about prosperity for our tribe. That's what it sounds like. And this is the wisdom of the ancients. This is how you get the force to be with you, because the force itself comes from something forceful, which is to say that there is always an energetic source of all energies. And entering into a relationship with the force means entering into a relationship with the source of the force. My poetic license. And this is how you do it, whether you are a human or a Vulcan. Same principle is there. Finally, duties are prescribed in sacred literature. So what to do, how to do it. Sacred literature means the Vedas. And sacred literature originates in the imperishable absolute, Om. So the particular word used in this verse, in 15, and now, the return of glasses. I'll try not to look at you so you don't get glare. The imperishable absolute, akshara, is the word that is used in text 15. Akshara, imperishable, also indicates omkara or pranava, which means the syllable om. So, in other words, Brahma, the Vedas, originate in akshara, the imperishable. The Vedas are understood to be the breath of Vishnu, emanating directly from Vishnu. So this same Vishnu to whom sacrifices are ultimately intended or to be offered is the source of knowledge about the need for sacrifice and the methodology of such sacrifice, how to do it in such a way as to make the sacrifices work. So here we've had two different conceptions of sacrifice. In these latter verses, from 10 to 15, Krishna is now talking about the correct way to implement the flowery words of the Vedas that he was trashing just a little while ago. He was talking to Arjuna earlier in the previous chapter about how he shouldn't get caught up in the flowery words of the Vedas. He shouldn't really get caught up in the mundane aspects of Vedic ethics and rituals just for the sake of material enjoyment, of trying to make everybody live happily ever after. Such engagement with the Vedas for the sake of karma kanda, or generating good karma. He basically says, you know, you're really missing the point here. Now he's going back and referring to these same Vedas, but speaking about how you properly understand them and execute the ritualistic ceremonies and the directives insofar as sacrifice and offering is concerned, in order to get good results. But it is in that first verse where he's specifically speaking about karma yoga rather than good karma that he will come back and emphasize, as illustrated by the verse we jumped ahead to at the end of the 5th chapter, where he identifies himself as the ultimate recipient of all sacrifices. And as we will see as we move on, the reciprocation that you get from Vishnu or Krishna is liberating, whereas the reciprocation you get from making offerings to the demigods for material enjoyment, those results are temporary and bind one to the reactions to actions. So two very different categories of sacrifice. Sacrifice for the sake of karma, sacrifice for the sake of liberation. Okay, which takes us to what we've covered tonight, the art of sacrifice, how to act without generating a reaction. One of the very important verses in the Bhagavad-gita that explains how you act in such a way as to liberate yourself from the reactions to actions, which is to make everything one that you do a sacrifice, an offering to the Supreme Person. We've talked about primitive mythology in the Bhagavad-gita, and whether or not this now is in the realm of something you can just sort of skip past because it's anachronistic, or whether or not it makes some sense. Once again, for you to decide for yourself what works for you. In any event, the proposition is that by sacrifice, either for the sake of getting a good karmic reaction, to live long and prosper, or to be liberated. You can engage in sacrifice in order to be prosperous in the material world or to liberate yourself from the material world. And it's just a question of what kind of sacrifice you make and who you make that sacrifice to. And with that in mind, please tell me if you have any further questions or comments to add to tonight's proceedings. While I am, here we go. All the talk of sacrifice and rules, Vishnu does not sound very merciful. I thought he was supposed to be loving. Sounds very Old Testament-y. Yeah, it does, doesn't it? So what's not merciful? All these gifts are coming. And that's mercy. For the sake of life in the material world, they are there. It is for the benefit of the recipient of the gift that one expresses some appreciation for having received it. Damodar Swami likes to give this example. A spoiled child cannot experience the love of their parents. A parent showers gifts on a child, and the child feels so entitled that he does not have any sense of gratitude, just expects these gifts to be given. And by cultivating this attitude of expectation or entitlement, one's heart hardens. One becomes immune to the feeling behind these gifts, which is the feeling of love. So for the sake of developing a relationship of love with the source of all these gifts, one expresses, in the beginning at least, gratitude for having received that gift. And that expression of gratitude develops into feelings of gratitude. Those feelings of gratitude develop into feelings of affection, and those feelings of affection develop into feelings of love. And because Vishnu is actually, or Krishna is actually very anxious to engage in a relationship of love with us, as he is engaged in a relationship of love with Arjuna, then that reciprocation is immediately there. We're the ones that are withholding that sense of spontaneous love for the source of our good fortune, not Krishna. So it is actually for our benefit that Krishna is giving instruction as to how to engage in sacrifice and letting us know that by doing so, we become liberated from the reactions to our actions. That's mercy. So even though this may sound on the surface, and certainly from the standpoint of karma kanda, those prescriptions in the Vedas that one undertakes for the sake of material prosperity, it sounds very much like an Old Testament contract. Obey my commandments and you get a heavenly reward. Obey my commandments and I'll do right by you. But this goes well beyond this. Krishna is not giving a commandment. He's giving advice, and it's good advice because nobody wants to suffer the reactions to their bad karma, to actions that are going to produce a bad result without even realizing that we're doing something that is producing a bad result. This might be news to us, that everything we've been doing up until this point is producing bad karma. You know, that we've been eating without that sense of offering or that gratitude, and we're consuming future suffering as a result. Wouldn't we want to know this? I certainly do. And here, Krishna is letting us know that's mercy. And that's the greatest gift of all. Okay. It seems difficult to adequately express gratitude to the Supreme. Yes, in fact, it's impossible. It's not just difficult, it's impossible. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't try. We do the best we can do. Yoga is a practice. So we express gratitude, and then our capacity to express gratitude expands. And then it expands some more and expands some more. And it can expand unlimitedly because it's spiritual. When we express gratitude to the Supreme Person, now that's on the spiritual platform, not the material platform, which is why it's liberating rather than entangling. And on the spiritual platform, there's limitless expansion. Therefore, gratitude can expand unlimitedly. So in the course of practicing our expressions of gratitude, we can simply think about the process of expressing gratitude and then let that feeling of gratitude naturally expand from our practice. It's the same as any yoga practice. We go deeper into our practice as we steadily continue to practice. So I hope that answers your question about the difficulty of adequately expressing gratitude. Let's see what else we got. Old or Original Testament gives a long list of guidelines or laws as to how to engage in good behavior. Yes, Torah means rules for living, how to live. So we have this same idea in the Abrahamic traditions, the idea that there are guidelines and that these guidelines are offered for our benefit. So it's not exclusive to the Vedic theistic tradition that we have these guidelines for how to harmonize with cosmic order. We also have that in the Old Testament, in the Abrahamic traditions. Thank you very much for bringing that up. I recently picked up a book on poetry or philosophy of Sufi mystics. I just paged through it quickly as I was thinking about getting it, and immediately I saw parallels with regard to one verse in particular in the Bhagavad-gita, how Krishna says, as they approach me, I reciprocate with them in precisely that way. And it was a passage about how those who pursue God from the point of worship, God reveals his majesty. Those who pursue God from the standpoint of love, God reveals his beauty, etc., etc. Anyway, I just picked it up yesterday, so I'm looking forward to checking it out. All right, I'll keep my eye open for questions while I start to wrap things up here. If you have any questions after the fact, you know where to find me, Hari@Hari-kirtana.com. Some of you have been kind enough to send me your comments and questions. I delight in receiving those comments and questions, so please keep those cards and letters coming in. Upcoming events. This weekend, I will be heading out to Lawrence, Kansas to join Gopi Sandal with her Yoga with Heart teacher training. That will be Saturday, Sunday, and Monday in hot Lawrence, Kansas. So I'm looking forward to that. If you are out in that direction, I hope to see you there. You can see me here on the internets with Adam Ellenboss of the Nightlight Astrology School. I'll be doing a series with him starting in a couple of weeks. 6:30 p.m., June 14th, we start. You can go to nightlightastrology.com, upcoming-events HTML, to get all the details on that. So I will be online for a while before we start our session here on Thursday nights at 8. Info session for my 300-hour Advanced Yoga Teacher Training Program. It's an advanced studies program that includes a couple of standalone courses that yoga teachers can take for continuing education credit, as well as the complete 300-hour training. And at 1 o'clock on Saturday afternoon, June 16th, I will be at Sky House Yoga along with the rest of our faculty. We will be happy to answer any questions that you have about the training, give you some more complete information. And then June 23rd, 24th, I will be returning once again to Cumberland, Maryland to do a meditation immersion weekend at the C. William Gilchrist Museum. So if you're up in that neck of the woods, please join me there. I'm looking forward to coming back up to Cumberland. Next week, we will continue with the Art of Sacrifice, participate a little more detail about participating in the cycles of nature and how we go about doing that. The idea of independent action, and I'll explain what I mean by that next week, along with action for the benefit of others. We will be covering verses 16 through 20 of the 3rd chapter. And that's all, folks. Thank you very, very much for joining me this evening. I am always very, very happy and honored to see you here, or to know that you are spending your time with me after the fact, watching or listening to the recordings of these webinars. It actually means a great deal to me that you choose to spend this time with me. So without further ado, since we're running over just a few minutes, thank you very, very much for your enthusiastic participation in this webinar series and our webinar tonight. I look forward to seeing you next time. All right. Have a nice night. End meeting for all.